My son said no expensive gifts this year. But when I saw my daughter-in-law flaunting her brand new Louis Vuitton purse on Instagram just days later, something inside me shattered like glass hitting concrete. The betrayal cut so deep I could barely breathe. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would share. And if for even a second this feels familiar, I only ask that you like this video and subscribe. It will help me keep opening my heart. My name is Margaret, and at 73 years old, I thought I knew what family meant. I was wrong. So terribly, heartbreakingly wrong. It was a Tuesday morning in November when I received that handwritten invitation to my grandson Tyler's 8th birthday party. The paper felt cheap between my fingers, the writing rushed and careless. Casual celebration, it read. No gifts, please, we're keeping it simple this year. The words stung, but I tried to understand. Money was tight for everyone, wasn't it? I sat in my small apartment on the Upper West Side, the same cramped space I'd called home for the past 15 years since Harold passed away. The radiator hissed its familiar tune, and the smell of Mrs. Rodriguez's cooking from next door drifted through the thin walls. Outside my window, I could see the bare branches of the oak tree that had been my only companion through countless lonely seasons in this concrete jungle we call New York City. My hands trembled as I set the invitation on my coffee table, right next to the stack of bills I'd been avoiding. The electric company didn't care that I was a grieving widow living on Social Security. They wanted their money, same as everyone else. But family was supposed to be different. Family was supposed to care. I walked to my small kitchen and put the kettle on, the same ritual I'd performed thousands of times before. The linoleum floor creaked under my feet, and I caught my reflection in the chrome surface of the refrigerator. When had I gotten so old? When had the woman who once ran a household of 5 children become the shadow of herself? The kettle's whistle pierced the silence, and I poured hot water over a tea bag I'd already used twice that week. Money was tight, but I made do. I always made do. That's what my generation learned. We made sacrifices, we endured, we put family first no matter what it cost us. As I stirred my weak tea, my phone buzzed on the counter. A notification from Facebook. My heart did that stupid little flutter it always did when I thought maybe, just maybe, it was Michael reaching out to his old mother. But it wasn't a message. It was a photo. There she was. Amanda. My son's wife of 12 years, standing in front of what looked like the Louis Vuitton store in Midtown Manhattan. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her smile radiant, and in her manicured hands was a gorgeous leather purse that probably cost more than I spent on groceries in 3 months. The caption made my blood run cold, early Christmas present from my amazing husband. Sometimes you just have to treat yourself. #blessed #Louis Vuitton #best husband ever. I stared at that screen until my eyes burned. The purse was beautiful, I'll give her that. Rich cognac leather with that unmistakable LV pattern, probably $800 or more. I knew because I'd window shopped at that same store years ago, back when Harold was alive and we had some extra money. Back when I foolishly dreamed of owning something so beautiful. But it wasn't the purse that broke my heart. It was the lie. The blatant, shameless lie wrapped up in a pretty bow and served to me like I was too stupid to understand what I was seeing. No expensive gifts this year. Keep it simple. Don't bring anything costly for Tyler. But Amanda gets Louis Vuitton. I set my phone down with shaking hands and walked to my bedroom, where I kept the photo albums. Page after page of memories stared back at me. Michael as a baby, his first steps, his graduation from high school. His wedding day, where I'd spent my entire savings account on a reception I couldn't afford because I wanted him to have the perfect day. There was Amanda in her wedding dress, the same Amanda who now wouldn't let me spend more than $20 on my own grandson's birthday gift. The same Amanda who'd looked me in the eye just 2 months ago and said, "Mom Margaret, we all need to tighten our belts this year. No unnecessary spending." Unnecessary spending. I thought about the envelope hidden in my underwear drawer, the one with $200 I'd been saving for Tyler's gift. Money I'd scraped together by skipping meals, by walking instead of taking the subway, by buying generic everything at the grocery store. $200 that was apparently too much to spend on my grandson, but not too much for Amanda's purse collection. The tears came then, hot and bitter, falling onto those old photographs like rain on yesterday's newspapers. How had it come to this? How had the woman who'd raised 4 children, who'd worked 2 jobs to put food on the table, who'd sacrificed everything for her family, become someone whose love was measured in dollar signs? I closed the album and walked to the window. The city stretched out before me, millions of lives intersecting and separating like threads in a tapestry I could no longer understand. Somewhere out there, my son was probably patting himself on the back for buying his wife something beautiful. Somewhere out there, my grandson was playing with toys I wasn't allowed to improve upon. And here I was, alone in my small apartment, wondering when I'd become the villain in my own family story. The phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. Michael appeared on the screen, and my traitorous heart leaped with hope. Hi, Mom. His voice sounded rushed, distracted. I could hear traffic in the background. Hello, sweetheart, I managed, wiping my eyes quickly as if he could see me through the phone. Listen, I know this is short notice, but we need to change Tyler's party to this Saturday instead of Sunday. Amanda's sister is flying in from LA, and Sunday works better for her schedule. Not, how are you, Mom? Not, are you feeling better after that doctor's appointment last week? Just straight to business, rearranging my weekend like I was a vendor to be managed rather than his mother. Of course, I said, because what else could I say? I'll be there. Great. And Mom? Remember what we said about gifts. Nothing over $20, okay? We're really trying to teach Tyler about moderation. Moderation. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. I saw Amanda's new purse on Facebook, I said quietly. The words spilled out before I could stop them. Silence on the other end. Then, what about it? It's very beautiful. Louis Vuitton. Another pause. Mom, that's different. That's between Amanda and me. Adult purchases aren't the same as spoiling children with expensive toys. Of course, I whispered. I understand. But I didn't understand. I didn't understand how my grandson's happiness was worth exactly $19.99, but Amanda's satisfaction was worth 10 times that amount. I didn't understand how I'd become the enemy for wanting to show my love the only way I knew how. Good. I've got to run. Love you, Mom. The line went dead before I could say I loved him too. I stood in my apartment, phone in hand, feeling smaller than I had since Harold's funeral. That was the moment I remembered Amanda's words from last Christmas, words I'd tried so hard to forget. We'd been in their kitchen, and I'd brought Tyler a bicycle I'd saved for months to afford. Amanda had pulled me aside while Michael was in the bathroom. Margaret, she'd said, her voice saccharine sweet, you need to stop trying to buy Tyler's love. He has everything he needs. I'd been so shocked I couldn't respond. Buy his love? Is that what they thought I was doing? I just want him to be happy, I'd stammered. Amanda had smiled that practiced smile of hers, the one that never reached her eyes. He'll be happy with or without expensive gifts. Maybe it's time you learned that. Now, holding Tyler's birthday invitation, I wondered if that's what this was really about. Not teaching Tyler about moderation, but teaching me about my place. Keeping the old grandmother in her lane, making sure I knew exactly how much my love was worth in their carefully calculated world. I looked around my small apartment with new eyes. The furniture I'd had for 20 years, the dishes I'd bought at thrift stores, the clothes I mended again and again rather than replace. This was my world now. This was what my life had shrunk to while my son bought his wife designer purses and told me $20 was enough to express a grandmother's love. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Harold, about how he'd warned me against giving the kids too much. You'll spoil them, Maggie, he used to say. They need to learn to appreciate what they have. But Harold had been talking about discipline, about raising responsible children. He'd never meant I should apologize for loving them. I thought about Michael as a little boy, how his face would light up when I surprised him with a new book or a special treat. I remembered saving my tip money from my waitressing job to buy him those expensive sneakers he'd wanted so badly in high school, the ones all the popular kids had. I remembered his bear hug, his whispered, "Thanks, Mom, you're the best." When had "you're the best" become "don't spend more than $20"? The next morning, I decided to take a walk. Fresh air always helped me think, and I needed to clear my head before I did something I'd regret. I bundled up in my old wool coat, the one with the small tear in the left pocket that I'd been meaning to sew for months, and headed out into the crisp November air. New York in autumn is beautiful, even when your heart is breaking. The leaves on the few trees that lined my street had turned golden and red, and the morning light filtered through them like stained glass. I walked slowly, partly because my arthritis was acting up, but mostly because I had nowhere urgent to be. No one was waiting for me, no one needed me to hurry. I found myself in front of Riverside Park, watching other grandparents push their grandchildren on swings. A little girl with pigtails squealed with delight as her grandfather pushed her higher and higher, his face beaming with joy. When was the last time I'd taken Tyler to a park? When was the last time Amanda had allowed me that simple pleasure? I sat on a bench and watched families enjoying each other's company, and I felt like I was observing life through a window I could never open again. Had I become such a burden? Had my love become so unwelcome? My phone buzzed. A text from Amanda. "Hi Mom, Margaret. Can you pick up juice boxes for the party? Store brand is fine. Thanks. Store brand is fine." Even her emoji felt condescending. I stared at that text for a long time. Here I was, the woman who'd raised their father, reduced to buying juice boxes while they splurged on luxury handbags. Here I was, being asked to contribute to a party where my own gifts weren't welcome unless they met their price specifications. I typed back, "Of course, dear." But something inside me was changing. Something was hardening like cement in winter. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my sister Rose in Florida. Rose and I had drifted apart after Harold died, partly because I'd become so consumed with trying to maintain my relationship with Michael's family that I'd neglected everyone else. Maggie? Rose's voice was warm with surprise. Is everything okay? I don't know, I said honestly. Rose, can I ask you something? Of course, honey. Do you think I'm a burden to my family? The silence on the other end stretched long enough to make me wonder if the call had dropped. Finally, Rose spoke, and her voice was gentle but firm. Margaret Elizabeth Murphy, what on earth has gotten into you? I told her everything. The birthday invitation, the Louis Vuitton purse, the $20 limit, the juice boxes. I told her about Christmases where I felt like an afterthought, about phone calls that always seemed to center around what they needed rather than how I was doing. I told her about the growing feeling that I was being managed rather than loved. When I finished, Rose was quiet for another long moment. Maggie, she said finally, do you remember what Mama used to say about respect? Our mother had been a strong Irish woman who'd immigrated to New York in the 1940s. She'd worked as a seamstress and raised 6 children on her own after our father died young. She used to say that respect isn't something you beg for, I whispered, remembering. That's right. She said you teach people how to treat you by what you accept. And honey, it sounds like you've been accepting some pretty poor treatment. After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen and really looked at my life for the first time in years. When was the last time Michael had asked about my arthritis? When was the last time Amanda had inquired about my health, my happiness, my dreams? When was the last time either of them had treated me like a person rather than an obligation? I thought about my friend Eleanor in 4B, whose daughter called her every Sunday just to chat. I thought about Mrs. Rodriguez next door, whose grandchildren visited every weekend and brought her flowers from the bodega. I thought about all the other grandmothers I knew who seemed to have found the secret to being valued by their families. What was I doing wrong? Or maybe the question was, what had I been doing wrong for so long that this had become normal? Saturday arrived gray and cold. I put on my best dress, the navy blue one I'd worn to Harold's funeral, and carefully applied makeup to hide the dark circles under my eyes. I stopped at the grocery store for juice boxes, store brand, as requested, and picked up Tyler's gift from where I'd hidden it in my closet. I decided to test them. Instead of the modest gift they'd demanded, I'd wrapped up something special, a deluxe art set I'd found on sale, original price $90, marked down to $35. Still over their ridiculous limit, but not outrageously so. If they truly cared about Tyler's happiness more than their arbitrary rules, they'd let it slide. If they cared more about controlling me than about their son's joy, I'd have my answer. The party was being held at their apartment in Queens, a place I'd helped them buy with a $10,000 loan that had never been repaid. I took 2 buses to get there, the art set carefully balanced on my lap while juice boxes threatened to spill out of my overflowing purse. Tyler answered the door, his face lighting up when he saw me. Grandma Maggie. His hug was fierce and genuine, the kind that reminded me why I put up with so much nonsense from his parents. At 8 years old, Tyler was still pure love, still uncomplicated by the politics and calculations that poisoned adult relationships. Happy birthday, my darling boy, I whispered into his hair, which smelled like birthday cake and childhood innocence. Amanda appeared behind him, looking perfectly put together as always. Her hair was freshly highlighted, her outfit clearly expensive, and yes, she was carrying that Louis Vuitton purse like it was a crown jewel. Mom Margaret. So good to see you. Did you bring the juice boxes? Not, hello, how are you? Not, thank you for coming. Straight to the juice boxes. I handed them over with a smile that felt like it was carved from stone. Store brand, as requested. Perfect. Tyler, why don't you show Grandma the living room while I put these in the kitchen? The living room was fuller than I'd expected. Amanda's sister had indeed arrived from Los Angeles, along with her husband and 2 children. Several of Tyler's school friends were there with their parents. Michael was in the corner talking to another father, and he waved when he saw me but didn't come over. I felt suddenly overdressed and out of place, like a relic from a bygone era that everyone was too polite to ask to leave. Tyler's other grandmother, Amanda's mother, Patricia, was holding court near the window. Patricia was everything I wasn't, still married, comfortably wealthy, always impeccably dressed. She lived in a beautiful house in Westchester and drove a car that cost more than I'd made in 5 years of working at the diner. Margaret. Patricia called out, her voice honey-sweet with false warmth. How lovely to see you. How are you holding up all alone in the city? The question was loaded with pity and judgment. Patricia had never approved of my choice to stay in Manhattan after Harold died, never understood that this apartment held my memories, my independence, my last connection to the life I'd built. Just fine, thank you, I replied evenly. How are you enjoying retirement? Patricia launched into a detailed description of her recent cruise to Europe, complete with photos on her phone. As she talked, I noticed she was carrying a designer purse that matched Amanda's almost exactly. Mother and daughter, both carrying bags that cost more than my monthly social security check. And this little beauty, Patricia said, noticing my gaze, was a gift from Amanda and Michael for my birthday last month. Isn't it gorgeous? They have such wonderful taste. My heart stopped. Amanda and Michael had bought Patricia a Louis Vuitton purse for her birthday. Not only were they comfortable spending hundreds of dollars on luxury items, they were comfortable buying them for the grandmother who already had everything while limiting the grandmother who had nothing to $20 expressions of love. I excused myself and went to the bathroom, where I stared at my reflection in Amanda's perfectly lit mirror. My face looked pale and drawn, my dress suddenly seeming shabby despite being my nicest outfit. I thought about the $35 I'd spent on Tyler's art set, money I'd taken from my grocery budget for the week. I thought about the juice boxes I'd dutifully purchased with my limited resources while Patricia chatted about European cruises paid for by her pension and her late husband's life insurance. When I came out, it was time for Tyler to open his presents. The children gathered in a circle on the expensive rug Amanda had bought last year, another purchase that had been outside my budget to contribute to despite gentle hints. Tyler opened gift after gift, each one carefully chosen and generously given by his other relatives and friends. Expensive toys, games, clothes, books. The $20 limit apparently applied only to me. When he got to my gift, I held my breath. Tyler tore off the wrapping paper with the enthusiasm only children possess, and his eyes went wide when he saw the art set. Wow! Grandma Maggie, this is amazing. Look at all these colors. He was genuinely thrilled, turning the box over and over to examine every feature. Other children crowded around to admire the set, and for a moment, I felt like I'd done something right. Then I saw Amanda's face. She was staring at the art set like it was a bomb that had just been detonated in her living room. Her smile was frozen, her eyes cold as winter windows. Tyler, she said sweetly, what a lovely gift from Grandma. Why don't we put it aside for now so you can open the rest? But Tyler was already trying to open the art set, eager to explore its contents. Can I draw something now, Mom? Please? Later, honey. Let's finish with the other presents first. The moment passed, but I could feel Amanda's disapproval like a physical weight in the room. Michael caught her eye and they exchanged a look I'd seen before, the kind of wordless communication that meant I was in trouble. After the presents were opened and the children had scattered to play, Amanda cornered me in the kitchen while I was refilling my water glass. Margaret, she said quietly, her voice sing-song with fake kindness, we talked about this. Talked about what, dear? The gift limit. Tyler's art set is clearly more than $20. I set down my water glass carefully, buying myself time to think. It was on sale, I said truthfully. $35, marked down from $90. That's still over our limit. Our limit. As if I'd had any say in establishing this arbitrary boundary. Amanda, I said slowly, I've been buying gifts for my grandson since the day he was born. I've never needed permission before. Her smile faltered slightly. It's not about permission, Mom Margaret. It's about consistency. About teaching Tyler that love isn't measured by how much money someone spends. I see. I looked pointedly at her Louis Vuitton purse, which was sitting on the counter between us like evidence in a trial. And what exactly does that purse teach Tyler about love and money? Amanda's face flushed red. That's completely different. That's between adults. Is it? Because Tyler sees it too. He sees you carrying around $800 worth of leather while his grandmother is told her love shouldn't cost more than $20. You're being dramatic. Am I? Tell me, Amanda, what did you and Michael spend on Patricia's birthday gift? The question hung in the air like smoke from a fire neither of us wanted to acknowledge. I don't see how that's relevant, Amanda finally said. It's relevant because Patricia showed me her new Louis Vuitton purse. The one you and Michael bought her. The one that matches yours. Amanda's composure cracked completely. Margaret, you're out of line. Am I? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you have one set of rules for the grandmother with money and another set for the grandmother without it. It looks like my love is worth exactly $19.99 while Patricia's is worth whatever you spent at Louis Vuitton. Stop it, Amanda hissed. You're making a scene. But I wasn't making a scene. I was speaking quietly, calmly, finally asking the questions I should have asked months ago. Years ago. I'm not making a scene, dear. I'm having a conversation. The kind we probably should have had a long time ago. Michael appeared in the doorway as if summoned by some invisible alarm. Everything okay in here? Amanda immediately shifted into victim mode, her voice trembling with manufactured hurt. Your mother is upset about Tyler's gift limit. She thinks we're being unfair. Michael looked at me with disappointment, and I realized this was a dance they'd choreographed before. Amanda creates conflict, then runs to Michael for protection, casting me as the unreasonable one. Mom, we've talked about this. Tyler doesn't need expensive toys. But Patricia needs expensive purses? Michael's face darkened. That's different, and you know it. I honestly don't know it, Michael. Explain to me how it's different. Mom, you're being childish. Childish. The word hit me like a slap. I'd raised this man, sacrificed for him, supported him through college and career changes and marriage and parenthood. I'd given him everything I had to give, and he was calling me childish for questioning why my love was being rationed while someone else's was celebrated. You know what? I said quietly. You're right. I'm being childish. Childish enough to think that after 73 years on this earth, after raising 4 children and burying a husband and working my fingers to the bone to give you everything you needed, I might have earned the right to buy my grandson a $35 art set without being lectured about limits and consistency. The kitchen fell silent. Even the sounds from the living room seemed muted, as if the whole apartment was holding its breath. Mom, Michael started, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. You want to talk about teaching Tyler lessons? Let me tell you what he's learning. He's learning that some grandmothers are worth Louis Vuitton purses and European cruise stories, while others are worth store-brand juice boxes and $20 limitations. He's learning that love is conditional, that generosity is measured, and that family is a business transaction where everyone's contribution is calculated. Amanda started to protest, but I kept going. He's learning that his grandma Maggie, the woman who helped his parents buy this apartment, who watched him every weekend when you needed date nights, who spent her last $50 on medicine for him when he had strep throat last year, isn't trusted to choose appropriate gifts. He's learning that some people in his family deserve respect and others deserve management. The truth poured out of me like water through a broken dam. All the hurt I'd swallowed, all the indignities I'd accepted, all the times I'd bitten my tongue and smiled and played along with their rules because I was terrified of losing them. You want consistency? I continued. Here's consistency. I have never, not once in Tyler's 8 years, bought him anything inappropriate or harmful. I have never overruled your parenting or undermined your authority. I have never done anything but love that boy with every fiber of my being. But somehow, that love has become a problem that needs to be managed. Michael's face was pale. Amanda looked like she wanted to disappear into the expensive tile flooring. I said quietly, it's time for me to leave. Mom, don't go, Michael said, but his voice lacked conviction. He was already calculating the fallout, already worried about Amanda's reaction more than his mother's feelings. Give Tyler my love, I said. Tell him Grandma had to leave early, but I hope he enjoys his art set. All $35 worth. I collected my purse and coat and walked through the living room where Tyler was playing with his friends. He ran over to hug me goodbye, his small arms wrapping around my waist with such fierce love that I almost broke down right there. Are you okay, Grandma? He asked, those innocent eyes studying my face with concern that his parents never showed. I'm fine, sweetheart. You have fun at your party, okay? And Tyler? Yeah? Never let anyone tell you that your love is worth less than someone else's. Remember that. He nodded solemnly, not understanding the words but sensing their importance. I left that apartment and walked to the bus stop in a kind of trance. The autumn air was sharp against my face, and the late afternoon sun cast long shadows on the sidewalk. I felt hollowed out and strangely liberated at the same time, like a building that's been demolished to make room for something new. On the bus ride home, I thought about Harold and what he would have said about all this. He'd been a quiet man, not given to drama or confrontation, but he'd had a strong sense of fairness that had guided our marriage for 40 years. Maggie, he'd have said, respect yourself enough to walk away when people stop respecting you. By the time I got back to my apartment, the sun was setting over Manhattan, painting my small windows with golden light. I sat in my favorite chair, the one Harold had bought me for our 20th anniversary, and I made a decision. I was done being managed. Done being rationed. Done apologizing for loving too much or too generously or in ways that made other people uncomfortable. I was done being the bargain basement grandmother. That night, I called Rose again and told her about the party, about the confrontation, about the feeling that I'd finally said things that needed to be said. Good for you, she said fiercely. It's about time. But Rose, what if I lose them completely? What if they decide I'm more trouble than I'm worth? Rose was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke, her voice was gentle but firm. Honey, if standing up for yourself costs you their love, then it wasn't real love to begin with. Real love doesn't come with price limits and behavior conditions. Real love doesn't need to be earned over and over again. After we hung up, I sat in the growing darkness and thought about what real love looked like. It looked like Tyler's uninhibited hug. It looked like Mrs. Rodriguez checking on me when I hadn't been downstairs for a few days. It looked like Eleanor inviting me for tea when she sensed I was lonely. It didn't look like Louis Vuitton purses for some and $20 limits for others. The fallout came quickly. By Sunday morning, I had 3 missed calls from Michael and a text from Amanda that was clearly meant to make me feel guilty. Tyler keeps asking why you left early. Hard to explain to an 8-year-old. I didn't respond immediately. For the first time in years, I took time to think about what I wanted to say instead of simply reacting with apologies and explanations. When I did call Michael back, it was on my terms, during my available time. "Mom, thank God," he said when he answered. "Amanda and I have been worried sick. Have you?" I asked mildly. "That's surprising, considering how upset you were with me yesterday." "Mom, we weren't upset. We were just..." He paused, clearly searching for words that wouldn't make things worse. "We were surprised by your reaction." My reaction to being treated like a second-class family member? My reaction to watching you buy Patricia a luxury purse while limiting my gifts to $20? Yeah, I can see how that would be surprising. It's not about the money, Mom. Isn't it? Because from where I'm sitting, everything has been about money. How much I can spend, what I can contribute, whether my expressions of love meet your approval. When did love become a budget item, Michael? The line was quiet for a long moment. When Michael spoke again, his voice was smaller, less certain. "We just want what's best for Tyler." "And you think limiting his grandmother's love is what's best for him?" "Mom, that's not, you're twisting things." "Am I? Let me ask you something, son. When you were Tyler's age, did anyone ever tell me how much I was allowed to spend on you? Did anyone ever limit my gifts or manage my expressions of love?" Silence. "When you needed school clothes or help with college or a down payment on this apartment, did I ever tell you there was a $20 limit on my caring?" More silence. "I gave you everything I had, Michael. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because that's what love looks like. And now you've decided that love needs to be controlled, measured, approved by committee." "Mom, please, I'm not finished. You want to know what Tyler learned at his party yesterday? He learned that his grandmother's love is considered dangerous unless it's properly contained. He learned that some people in his family deserve respect while others deserve management. He learned that generosity is suspicious and that love comes with conditions." When Michael finally spoke, his voice was thick with something I couldn't identify. Guilt, maybe. Or recognition. "What do you want from us, Mom?" It was the first honest question he'd asked in years. "I want to be treated like a person instead of a problem to be solved. I want my love for Tyler to be received as a gift instead of a threat. I want to stop apologizing for caring too much and giving too freely. I want to be respected as Tyler's grandmother, not managed like a vendor whose services need to be regulated. And if we can't give you that?" The question hung between us like a bridge that could either connect us or collapse entirely. "Then I guess we'll all have to live with the consequences," I said quietly. After we hung up, I felt strangely calm. For the first time in years, I'd spoken my truth without apologizing for it. I'd named the dynamic that had been poisoning our relationship without trying to soften it or make it easier for them to swallow. The next few weeks passed quietly. No calls from Michael, no texts from Amanda. Tyler's thank you note for his art set arrived in the mail, written in his careful 8-year-old handwriting. "Dear Grandma Maggie, thank you for the art set. I drew you a picture. I hope you like it. Love, Tyler." The picture was a stick figure drawing of 2 people holding hands under a rainbow. One figure was labeled Tyler and the other Grandma. It was the most beautiful thing I'd received in years. I put Tyler's drawing on my refrigerator and decided to focus on the relationships in my life that brought me joy instead of stress. I started having weekly tea with Eleanor, whose stories about her travels as a young woman fascinated me. I began volunteering at the community center, reading to children who reminded me why I'd fallen in love with being a grandmother in the first place. I also started seeing a counselor, something I'd resisted for years because it seemed like an indulgence I couldn't afford. But Rose convinced me that my mental health was worth the modest cost, and she was right. Talking to Dr. Sarah helped me understand patterns I'd been blind to, boundaries I'd never learned to set, and the difference between loving generously and enabling poor treatment. "You've spent so many years trying to earn love through giving," Dr. Sarah observed during one of our sessions, "that you've forgotten love should be freely given, not purchased." She was right. I'd been trying to buy my place in Tyler's life, trying to prove my worth through generosity because somewhere along the way, I'd started believing I wasn't valuable enough on my own. November turned to December, and the holidays approached with their usual mixture of joy and complicated family dynamics. I expected to spend Christmas alone for the first time since Harold died, and while the thought was lonely, it also felt peaceful. No walking on eggshells, no monitoring my spending, no worrying about whether my gifts would meet with approval. Then Tyler called. "Grandma Maggie?" His little voice was uncertain, sad in a way that made my heart clench. Hello, sweetheart. How are you? I'm okay. Grandma, are you coming for Christmas? The question I'd been dreading. How do you explain adult complications to a child who just wants his family together? I don't know yet, honey. Why don't you put mommy or daddy on the phone? They're fighting, he said matter-of-factly. They fight a lot now. About you, I think. My heart broke a little more. The last thing I'd wanted was for my conflict with his parents to affect Tyler's sense of security. Tyler, listen to me. Whatever happens between the grown-ups, it has nothing to do with how much I love you. Do you understand that? Yeah. But I miss you, Grandma. When are you coming to see me? Soon, sweetheart. I promise. After Tyler hung up, I sat in my kitchen and cried. Not the bitter tears of anger I'd shed after his birthday party, but the deep, grieving tears of loss. I was losing my grandson because I'd finally stood up for myself, and the unfairness of it was overwhelming. But then I remembered Dr. Sarah's words, sometimes loss is the price we pay for self-respect. But without self-respect, we lose ourselves anyway, and that's a much higher cost. 2 days before Christmas, Amanda showed up at my door unannounced. I was in my pajamas and robe, having given up on getting dressed since there was nowhere to go and no one to see. I looked through the peephole and saw her standing in the hallway, shifting nervously from foot to foot. I considered not answering. I was tired of drama, tired of confrontations, tired of being made to feel like the villain for having feelings. But curiosity got the better of me. Amanda, I said as I opened the door. This is unexpected. She looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her eyes were red-rimmed, and she was carrying a tissue box instead of her designer purse. Can I come in? She asked quietly. I stepped aside and let her enter my small apartment. She looked around with eyes I'd never seen before, not judgmental or calculating, but genuinely observant, as if she was seeing my life for the first time. I brought coffee, she said, holding up a bag from the expensive cafe near their apartment. That kind you like? The hazelnut. It was such a small gesture, but it caught me off guard. Amanda had never brought me anything before, never seemed to notice what I liked or didn't like. Thank you, I said, genuinely surprised. Have a seat. We sat at my small kitchen table, the same table where I'd opened Tyler's birthday invitation, where I'd stared at her Instagram post, where I'd made the decision to finally speak my truth. The coffee was good, rich and warm, a luxury I rarely afforded myself. Margaret, Amanda began, then stopped. She took a shaky breath and started again. I owe you an apology. I waited, not making it easier for her, not rushing to fill the silence the way I usually did. I'd been thinking about what you said at Tyler's party. About the purse, about the different rules. You were right. The admission seemed to cost her something. She was gripping her coffee cup so tightly her knuckles were white. I never meant for it to seem like we valued Patricia more than you. But that's what we did, isn't it? We created 2 different standards. Why? I asked simply. Amanda was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee as if it held answers she was afraid to speak. Because Patricia doesn't need us, she finally said. She has her own money, her own life, her own security. She's not vulnerable the way you are. And I guess, somewhere in my mind, I started thinking that meant we could treat you differently. That you'd put up with things she wouldn't. It was the first honest thing Amanda had ever said to me, and it hurt as much as it relieved. At least now I understood the calculation. And Michael? I asked. Michael goes along with whatever I say when it comes to family stuff. He doesn't like conflict, so he lets me make the decisions and then backs me up. But Margaret, Tyler has been asking about you every day. He doesn't understand why you haven't called, why we're not seeing you for Christmas. And when I try to explain, she paused, tears threatening to spill over. I can't explain it without making us sound terrible. How does this end, Amanda? I asked quietly. What do you want from this visit? I want to fix it. I want Tyler to have his grandmother back. I want to stop feeling like a horrible person every time he asks about you. And the gift limits? The $20 rule? Amanda winced. Gone. I was being controlling and petty, and I'm sorry. Patricia called me out on it, actually. When she heard about the birthday party, she was appalled. She said if you can't trust a grandmother to choose appropriate gifts after 8 years, then the problem isn't the grandmother. I almost smiled at that. Patricia defending me was not something I'd seen coming. What about Michael? He's scared, Amanda admitted. Scared that he's been a terrible son, scared that he's damaged things beyond repair. He doesn't know how to apologize without admitting just how wrong he's been. And you? Amanda looked directly at me for the first time since she'd arrived, and her eyes were full of genuine remorse. I'm scared too. Scared that I've been so worried about protecting my family's resources that I forgot you were part of the family. Scared that my need to control everything pushed away someone Tyler loves. Scared that I've been a terrible daughter-in-law and I don't know how to fix it. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of years of misunderstanding and hurt settling between us like dust after an explosion. Finally, Amanda reached into her bag and pulled out something wrapped in tissue paper. "This is for you," she said. "An early Christmas gift. From Michael and me. And before you ask, it cost more than $20. I unwrapped the tissue paper carefully and found a delicate silver bracelet with a single charm, a heart engraved with "World's Best Grandma." "It's not much," Amanda said quickly. "But I thought maybe it was time we started showing you how much you mean to us instead of just expecting you to know." The bracelet was beautiful, but more than that, it was a symbol. An acknowledgement that I had value, that my role in Tyler's life was appreciated, that my love was finally being received as the gift it was meant to be. "It's lovely," I said, and I meant it. "Will you come to Christmas dinner?" Amanda asked. "Tyler has been making decorations for weeks. He's so excited to show you his art projects. He's been using that art set constantly." I looked at this woman who had caused me so much pain, who had made me feel small and managed and unworthy, and I saw something I hadn't expected: genuine remorse. Not the calculated apologizing of someone trying to get their way, but the raw, uncomfortable honesty of someone who had looked in the mirror and didn't like what they saw. "I'll come," I said. "But Amanda, things have to change. Really change, not just temporarily change until this blows over." "They will," she promised. "They already have." Christmas dinner was different. Not perfect, there was still awkwardness, still the feeling that we were all learning new steps to an old dance, but better. Tyler was overjoyed to see me, and he spent the entire meal showing me pictures he'd drawn with his art set, stories he'd written, projects he'd made at school. Michael was quieter than usual, but when he walked me out to the car they'd hired to take me home, another surprise, he stopped on the sidewalk and looked at me with eyes that reminded me of the little boy he used to be. "Mom, I'm sorry," he said simply. "For all of it. For making you feel like you weren't important, for letting Amanda set rules that were unfair, for taking you for granted. You deserved better from us, and I'm going to make sure you get it." It wasn't a grand gesture or a dramatic speech, but it was sincere in a way that his words hadn't been in years. "We're going to be okay," I told him, and I meant it. The months that followed brought gradual healing. Amanda began including me in family decisions, asking my opinion on Tyler's activities and school choices. Michael started calling just to chat, not because he needed something. Tyler started spending more time at my apartment, just the two of us, building the kind of relationship I'd always wanted us to have. But more importantly, I started building a life that didn't revolve entirely around their approval. I kept volunteering at the community center, kept having tea with Eleanor, kept seeing Dr. Sarah. I learned that loving my family didn't mean disappearing into them, and that setting boundaries wasn't selfish, it was necessary. One day in early spring, Tyler and I were walking through Central Park when he stopped suddenly and looked up at me. "Grandma," he said, "I'm glad you got mad at Mom and Dad." "You are? Why?" "Because now when you give me presents, I know you really want to. Before, it felt like you had to ask permission. That didn't seem right." Out of the mouths of babes. Tyler had understood something adults had taken months to figure out, that love constrained is not really love at all. That night, as I sat in my apartment with Tyler's latest drawing on my refrigerator and the silver bracelet on my wrist, I thought about the journey I'd taken from that November morning when I'd received his birthday invitation to this April evening when I felt truly valued as his grandmother. It hadn't been easy. Standing up for yourself never is, especially when you've spent years training people to treat you as less than. But it had been necessary. Without self-respect, all the love in the world becomes worthless, because it's built on a foundation of fear and insecurity rather than genuine affection. I thought about Patricia and her Louis Vuitton purse, about the way she carried herself with confidence and expectation of good treatment. I thought about how I'd envied that confidence without understanding that it came from within, not from external circumstances. Patricia demanded respect not because she was wealthy, but because she respected herself. I was finally learning to do the same. As I prepared for bed that night, I looked at myself in the mirror and saw something I hadn't seen in years, a woman who knew her own worth. Not because her family finally acknowledged it, but because she'd acknowledged it herself. My phone buzzed with a text from Amanda. "Thank you for dinner tonight. Tyler had the best time." "So did we." Red heart, I smiled and texted back, "My pleasure. See you Sunday for Tyler's art show." Sunday. Tyler was having an art exhibition at school, and for the first time in years, I wouldn't be wondering if I was allowed to be proud, allowed to celebrate, allowed to love openly and generously. I would just be a grandmother celebrating her grandson, exactly as it should be. The silver bracelet caught the light as I set my phone down, and I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago, apologetic, diminished, afraid of taking up too much space or asking for too much love. That woman had believed she needed to earn her place in her family through careful management of her own needs and wants. This woman knew better. This woman understood that love is not a limited resource that needs to be rationed, but an infinite gift that grows when it's freely shared. This woman had learned that respect is not something you beg for, but something you model by respecting yourself first. As I turned off the lights and settled into bed, I thought about Tyler and the life lessons he was learning now. He was seeing a grandmother who knew her own value, who gave from abundance rather than scarcity, who loved without apologizing. He was learning that family relationships work best when they're built on mutual respect rather than quiet desperation. Most importantly, he was learning that love should feel like freedom, not constraint. And maybe, just maybe, that lesson would serve him well when he became an adult navigating his own complicated relationships. Maybe he would remember his grandmother who stood up for herself, who refused to accept crumbs when she deserved a seat at the table, who taught him that loving someone doesn't mean disappearing into them. Maybe he would remember that love without respect isn't really love at all. The last thing I thought about before falling asleep was Harold, and how proud he would be of the woman I'd become. Not because I'd finally gotten the treatment I deserved from my family, but because I'd finally started treating myself with the dignity he'd always seen in me. Respect yourself enough to walk away when people stop respecting you, I whispered into the darkness, remembering his words. But more than that, respect yourself enough to walk back when they start respecting you again. And most importantly, respect yourself enough to build a life worth walking back to. That's the lesson I want to leave with you today. Whether you're 73 like me, or 53, or any age where you found yourself accepting less than you deserve from the people who are supposed to love you most, remember that love should feel like celebration, not negotiation. You don't have to earn your place in your own family. You don't have to apologize for caring deeply or giving generously. You don't have to make yourself smaller to make others more comfortable. You are worthy of love that comes without conditions, respect that doesn't need to be purchased, and relationships that honor your full humanity rather than just the parts that are convenient for others. Now, as I sit here a year later, I want to share with you some of the most important lessons I learned from this experience. Because what happened to me isn't unique. Every day, I get messages from viewers who tell me their own stories of feeling undervalued, overlooked, or taken for granted by their families. The first lesson is this: enablement disguised as love is not love at all. I thought I was being loving by accepting their unfair treatment, by swallowing my hurt feelings, by making excuses for their behavior. But what I was actually doing was enabling them to continue treating me poorly. I was teaching them that my feelings didn't matter, that my needs were negotiable, that my love would always be available no matter how they treated me. Real love requires honesty. It requires setting boundaries. It requires being willing to have difficult conversations even when they're uncomfortable. The kindest thing I ever did for my family was to stop pretending their treatment of me was acceptable. The second lesson: you cannot love someone into respecting you. I spent years trying to prove my worth through increasingly generous gifts, constant availability, and endless accommodation of their needs. I thought if I just loved them enough, if I just gave enough, if I just sacrificed enough, they would finally see my value. But respect doesn't work that way. People don't suddenly wake up one morning and decide to treat you better because you've suffered enough. They treat you better when you require them to treat you better. The third lesson: your age doesn't diminish your worth. There's this insidious message in our society that older people should be grateful for whatever attention they get from their families. That we should accept being managed, controlled, or dismissed because we're lucky anyone wants to deal with us at all. That's garbage. Your years of life experience, your sacrifices, your love, your wisdom, these things make you more valuable, not less. The fact that you need your family support doesn't mean you don't deserve their respect. Let me tell you about my friend Dorothy, who lives down the hall. At 85, she's one of the most vibrant people I know. Her son and daughter-in-law used to treat her the same way Michael and Amanda treated me, like a burden to be managed rather than a person to be valued. The difference was, Dorothy never accepted it. Margaret, she told me one day over tea, I raised children, not kings and queens. They don't get to treat me like their subject just because I'm aging. Dorothy taught me that getting older doesn't mean getting smaller. It doesn't mean accepting less. It doesn't mean being grateful for scraps when you deserve a meal. The fourth lesson: family doesn't give you license to treat people poorly. Just because someone is related to you doesn't mean they have to accept whatever treatment you dish out. Just because someone loves you doesn't mean their feelings don't matter. Just because someone depends on you emotionally doesn't mean you get to control their expressions of love. I used to think that because Michael was my son, he would never truly hurt me. I thought our bond was unbreakable, that blood was thicker than bad behavior. I learned the hard way that family relationships require the same respect, kindness, and consideration as any other relationship. Sometimes more, because the stakes are higher. The fifth lesson: guilt is not love. For years, I operated from a place of guilt. Guilt that I wasn't wealthy like Patricia. Guilt that I needed help sometimes. Guilt that I wanted to give expensive gifts to my grandson. Guilt that I had feelings about how I was being treated. Amanda was brilliant at manipulating that guilt. Every conversation was designed to make me feel like I was asking for too much, expecting too much, wanting too much. She made me feel guilty for having needs, guilty for having opinions, guilty for taking up space. But guilt-based relationships aren't sustainable. They breed resentment, dishonesty, and eventually, breakdown. Love-based relationships, on the other hand, create space for everyone's needs, everyone's feelings, everyone's humanity. The sixth lesson: it's never too late to change the dynamic. I spent years believing that the pattern was set, that this was just how things were in our family, that I was too old to rock the boat. I told myself stories about keeping the peace, about not causing drama, about being the bigger person. But those stories were really about fear. Fear of losing my family, fear of being alone, fear of discovering that maybe they didn't really love me as much as I thought they did. The truth is, you're never too old to demand better treatment. You're never too old to set boundaries. You're never too old to say, this isn't working for me, and it needs to change. Will it be scary? Yes. Will some people resist? Absolutely. Will you risk losing relationships that aren't built on genuine love and respect? Unfortunately, yes. But here's what I discovered: the relationships you lose were already lost. They were built on your compliance, not your value. The relationships that survive will be stronger, healthier, and more honest than they were before. Now, I want to address something that many of you have asked about in your comments: how to have these difficult conversations. Because it's one thing to decide you deserve better treatment, and another thing entirely to actually communicate that to your family. First, pick your battles. You can't address every hurt feeling, every slight, every moment of disrespect all at once. Choose the issues that matter most to you, the patterns that are causing the most pain, the boundaries that are most important to establish. For me, it was the gift restrictions. That was the symbol of everything else: the control, the double standards, the lack of respect for my judgment. By addressing that specific issue, I was really addressing the whole dynamic. Second, be specific. Don't just say, you don't respect me, or you treat me badly. Give concrete examples. Explain the specific behaviors that are hurtful and why they're hurtful. When I talked to Michael and Amanda, I didn't just say they were treating me unfairly. I pointed out the specific difference between how they treated me and how they treated Patricia. Third, don't apologize for having feelings. I used to start every difficult conversation with, I'm sorry to bring this up, but, or I don't want to cause problems, but. Those apologies undermined everything I was trying to say. They sent the message that my feelings were an inconvenience, that my needs were optional. Now I start difficult conversations with, I need to talk to you about something important, or, there's an issue we need to address. I state facts. I express my feelings without apologizing for having them. I make requests without begging for permission to make them. Fourth, be prepared for pushback. People who have been benefiting from an unfair dynamic don't usually welcome change. They might call you selfish, dramatic, unreasonable, or oversensitive. They might try to make you feel guilty for rocking the boat. They might threaten to withdraw their love or support. This is where your resolve will be tested. This is where you'll need to remember why you started this conversation in the first place. You started it because the current situation wasn't working. You started it because you deserve better. You started it because lying to keep the peace wasn't really keeping the peace, it was just postponing the inevitable breakdown. Fifth, be willing to walk away. This is the hardest part, but it's also the most important. If you're not willing to actually leave a situation that doesn't improve, then you have no leverage. Your requests for change become suggestions that can be easily ignored. When I left Tyler's party early, I wasn't trying to punish anyone. I was showing them that I was serious about requiring different treatment. I was demonstrating that I valued myself enough to remove myself from situations where I wasn't being valued. Sixth, build a support system outside of the relationship. This is crucial. You need people in your life who value you, respect you, and support your decision to demand better treatment from others. If your entire social and emotional world revolves around the people who are treating you poorly, you'll never have the strength to require change. For me, reconnecting with Rose was life-changing. Having Dr. Sarah to talk to was invaluable. Building friendships with Eleanor and the other volunteers at the community center gave me perspective and strength. These relationships reminded me that I was lovable, that I was valuable, that I deserved better. Let me share another story with you. Last month, I was at the community center when a woman named Janet approached me after story time. She was probably in her 60s, impeccably dressed, but something about her posture suggested defeat. Margaret, she said, I've been watching your videos. I think I'm in a similar situation. Janet told me about her daughter Lisa, who had been controlling every aspect of Janet's relationship with her grandchildren for years. Lisa decided when Janet could visit, what she could bring, what activities they could do together. Lisa had even gone so far as to tell Janet she couldn't take her grandchildren out for ice cream without permission because it might spoil their dinner. "But Margaret," Janet said, tears in her eyes, "Lisa says it's because she cares about the children's well-being. She says I'm being selfish for wanting to override her parenting decisions." I recognized that manipulation immediately. It was the same tactic Amanda had used with me, making reasonable requests for respect seem like selfish overreach. "Janet," I said gently, "tell me about your relationship with your own grandmothers. Did your parents control every interaction you had with them?" She thought about it for a moment, then shook her head. "No. My grandmother used to take me on adventures all the time. We'd go to the movies, or shopping, or out for treats. My parents trusted her judgment because she loved me." "And did those adventures harm you? Did your grandmother's love and generosity ruin your life?" Janet smiled for the first time since we'd started talking. "Of course not. Some of my happiest childhood memories are of time spent with my grandmother." "Then why do you think your love would be harmful to your grandchildren?" That question changed everything for Janet. She realized that Lisa's control wasn't really about protecting the children, it was about maintaining power over their relationship with their grandmother. Janet and I worked together over several weeks to develop a plan. She had conversations with Lisa about boundaries and respect. When Lisa continued to be controlling, Janet started setting her own limits. She stopped asking permission for reasonable activities with her grandchildren. She stopped accepting unreasonable restrictions on her time with them. The breakthrough came when Janet's grandson Alex had a birthday party. Lisa had instructed Janet to bring only a small, practical gift. Instead, Janet brought the bicycle she'd wanted to give him, a beautiful red bike that Alex had been asking for. When Lisa saw the bike, she was furious. She pulled Janet aside and delivered the same lecture I'd gotten about spoiling children and overriding parenting decisions. But this time, Janet was ready. "Lisa," she said calmly, "I've been Alex's grandmother for 7 years. In that time, have I ever given him anything harmful? Have I ever undermined your authority in any significant way? Have I ever done anything to suggest that I don't care about his well-being?" Lisa had to admit that the answer to all those questions was no. "Then why," Janet continued, "don't you trust me to choose appropriate gifts for my grandson? Why do you need to manage my expressions of love?" Lisa tried to deflect, to make it about consistency and rules, but Janet didn't let her. "This isn't about Alex," Janet said. "This is about control. You want to control my relationship with my grandchildren, and I'm not going to allow that anymore. I love these children, and I deserve to express that love in ways that feel genuine to me, as long as I'm not actually harming them." The conversation was difficult, but it was necessary. And you know what happened? Lisa backed down. Not immediately, not completely, but gradually. She realized that Janet wasn't trying to undermine her parenting, she was trying to be a grandmother. Today, Janet has a much healthier relationship with her daughter and a closer relationship with her grandchildren. She still respects Lisa's reasonable boundaries, but she no longer accepts unreasonable control. The key was Janet learning to distinguish between appropriate parental boundaries and inappropriate control. A parent has the right to say, "No ice cream right before dinner," or "Please don't let them stay up too late." A parent doesn't have the right to micromanage every interaction between grandparents and grandchildren or to treat grandparents like untrustworthy strangers. Now, I want to talk about something else that's come up in many of your comments, the role of money in family dynamics. Because my story involved expensive gifts and purses, some people have focused on the financial aspect and missed the deeper point. This isn't really about money. It's about respect, consistency, and the way love is valued within a family system. I've heard from viewers who've experienced similar dynamics around time instead of money. Their adult children strictly limit how long they can spend with grandchildren, or what activities they're allowed to do together, while giving other grandparents unlimited access. I've heard from viewers whose adult children monitor their conversations with grandchildren, censoring topics or interrupting interactions, while allowing other family members to speak freely. I've heard from viewers whose adult children dismiss their opinions, ignore their expertise, and treat them like children, while seeking advice and validation from other older adults in their lives. The common thread isn't money, it's the assumption that some people in the family deserve respect and autonomy while others need to be managed and controlled. Let me tell you about Maria, a viewer who reached out to me with a different but related situation. Maria is a retired teacher who speaks 3 languages and has a master's degree in education. Despite her impressive credentials and decades of experience working with children, her son and daughter-in-law constantly correct her interactions with her grandchildren. When Maria reads to her grandson in Spanish, her daughter-in-law interrupts to say, "We're trying to focus on English right now." When Maria helps her granddaughter with homework using methods she's successfully used with hundreds of students, her son tells her, "That's not how they do it at school now." When Maria suggests educational activities or shares her professional insights about child development, she's told, "Things are different now," or "The research has changed." But when the children's teacher, a woman 30 years younger than Maria with a fraction of her experience, makes suggestions, those are received as valuable professional advice. Maria wasn't being disrespected because of money. She was being disrespected because her adult children had decided that her expertise, her experience, and her judgment weren't valuable. They were treating her like an outdated relic rather than a knowledgeable professional who happened to love their children. The solution was the same as mine. Maria had to stop accepting disrespectful treatment. She had to have honest conversations about how their behavior was affecting her. She had to be willing to limit her interactions with them if they couldn't treat her with basic respect. And just like in my situation, the breakthrough came when Maria stopped trying to prove her worth and started requiring them to recognize it. Another common theme in the messages I receive is the fear of being difficult. So many older adults have been conditioned to believe that having needs, expressing opinions, or requiring respect makes them burdensome. Let me be clear about something: advocating for yourself is not being difficult. Setting boundaries is not being difficult. Refusing to accept poor treatment is not being difficult. You know what's actually difficult? Living with someone who has no boundaries, who accepts any treatment, who never advocates for themselves. That person becomes resentful, passive-aggressive, and emotionally exhausting to be around. They create drama through their martyrdom and their constant subtle signals that they're being mistreated. The person who clearly communicates their needs, sets reasonable boundaries, and treats themselves with respect is actually much easier to have a relationship with. You know where you stand with them. You know what they expect. You know they'll be honest with you about problems before those problems become relationship threatening. My relationship with Michael and Amanda is better now than it's been in years, not despite my willingness to set boundaries, but because of it. They know I love them, but they also know I respect myself. They know I'm invested in our relationship, but they also know I won't stay in a relationship that consistently diminishes me. That clarity has made our interactions more honest, more respectful, and ultimately more loving. I also want to address the people who've asked whether I think I was partly to blame for how things developed in my family. The answer is, of course I was. I trained them to treat me poorly by accepting poor treatment for so long. I taught them that my feelings were optional, that my needs were negotiable, that my love would always be available no matter how they behaved. I enabled the dynamic by making excuses for their behavior, by focusing on their intentions instead of their impact, by prioritizing peace over honesty. But here's what's important to understand: recognizing your role in creating an unhealthy dynamic is not the same as blaming yourself for other people's choices. I may have enabled their disrespect, but I didn't force them to be disrespectful. I may have set a bad example by not valuing myself, but they still chose not to value me. Taking responsibility for your part in a problem is empowering because it means you have the power to change it. You can't control other people's choices, but you can control your own responses to those choices. The moment I stopped focusing on changing Michael and Amanda and started focusing on changing myself, my boundaries, my expectations, my willingness to accept certain treatment, everything shifted. That's the paradox of relationships. The more you try to control other people, the less power you actually have. The more you focus on controlling yourself, the more influence you have over the relationship's dynamic. Now, as we near the end of our time together today, I want to leave you with some practical steps you can take if you recognize yourself in my story. First, do an honest assessment of your relationships. Look at the patterns, not just the individual incidents. Are you consistently the one who apologizes? Are you consistently the one who accommodates? Are you consistently the one whose needs come last? If the answer is yes, you're probably in an imbalanced relationship that needs to change. Second, identify your non-negotiables. What treatment are you absolutely not willing to accept anymore? What boundaries do you need to set? What respect do you need to require? For me, it was being treated as an equal participant in family decisions about my grandson. For Janet, it was having her love and judgment trusted unless there was a specific reason not to trust them. For Maria, it was having her expertise and experience valued. Third, communicate your boundaries clearly and calmly. Don't wait until you're so angry that you explode. Don't hint or hope that people will figure it out on their own. Be direct about what needs to change and why. Fourth, be prepared to enforce your boundaries. This is the step most people struggle with, but it's the most important one. A boundary without consequences isn't a boundary, it's a suggestion. If someone continues to treat you disrespectfully after you've clearly communicated that it's unacceptable, you need to be willing to limit your interaction with them. That might mean leaving early like I did at Tyler's party. It might mean declining invitations. It might mean reducing contact. The enforcement doesn't have to be punitive or dramatic. It just has to be consistent. Fifth, build a support system of people who value you. You need relationships in your life that remind you of your worth, that validate your right to be treated well, that support your efforts to create healthier dynamics with others. Finally, be patient with the process. Changing long-established relationship patterns takes time. There will be setbacks. There will be moments when you doubt yourself. There will be pressure to go back to the old ways. But remember why you started. Remember that you deserve to be treated with respect, that your love is valuable, that your needs matter. Remember that it's never too late to become the person you wish you'd always been, someone who loves generously but also loves themselves, someone who values others but doesn't devalue themselves in the process. As I sit here in my apartment today, looking at Tyler's latest artwork on my refrigerator and feeling the weight of the silver bracelet on my wrist, I'm filled with gratitude. Not just for the healing that's happened in my family, but for the woman I've become in the process. I'm grateful for the hard conversations that led to deeper understanding. I'm grateful for the boundaries that led to better treatment. I'm grateful for the courage it took to walk away, because it led to the wisdom to walk back on my own terms. Most of all, I'm grateful that Tyler is growing up seeing healthy relationship dynamics modeled for him. He's learning that love includes respect, that family relationships require effort from everyone involved, that it's possible to work through difficult conflicts if everyone is committed to treating each other well. That might be the most important gift I can give him, not the expensive art set that started all of this, but the example of a grandmother who knew her own worth and required others to recognize it too. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you for listening. Thank you for letting me share my heart with you. Thank you for being part of a community that believes everyone deserves to be loved well. Your story matters too. Your relationships matter. Your well-being matters. You matter. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise.